we have failed to understand why nature transcends itself, why there is transition in nature. We have failed because right from the start, we presupposed that there is no such a thing that goes beyond the deterministic, analytical way to see nature. Because if we admitted that, we had to admit raw transcendence. And even if our science, when it was evolving all along the end of the 19th century and in the 20th century with quantum physics and with other discoveries, was pointing to the direction of this idea that matter is not something limited to what we see as purely, components of that bit of matters that create life, create something that looks living just because it's actually combined. But the very idea that it's actually combining itself is the real mystery, is the real problem. We decided to describe things only a posteriori. Like, okay, it's living being, but it is just because it's composed with that and that and that. And at the end of the day, when we see the what I call like the complexity paradigm, that's basically the same thing, but in a worse manner in a way, because we say, we don't understand at all what is actually happening. And because it's too complex, because we don't know what is happening, what is going beyond itself, we call it complexity. That's so crazy. We just call it complexity. But it's not because it is more complex that it becomes self-sustainable, like Francis Eligon would put it. It becomes it's piloting itself because it's more complex. It's because
self-organized.
Self-organized, exactly. If it is self-organized, it is not because complexity. It's actually because there is something like what we could call the self, inside the self, inside the cell, inside. That's an inside that is not a location. That's actually the mind that allows things to become more complex, but it's not complexity itself.
And like this infinite regress of the self inside the self inside the self, this brings you to the being and nothing, and it brings you to the void, and it brings you to the anguish of the void, and it brings you to the impotence. So exactly. if you exclude this being nothing and the anguish of the void and the anxiety, and you exclude this dimension, then you actually, again, you end up in an empty discourse.
Exactly.